Kal'then had seen some peculiar things during his 40 cycles as a xenoarchaeologist for the Pinnacle Collective. He had excavated Thornian pleasure domes which turned out to be significantly less exciting than advertised. He had catalogued 17 different species interpretations of what constituted art, most of which looked like someone had sneezed on a canvas and called it profound. But this was something else entirely. The human colony on Kepler 442b had been abandoned for 73 Earth years, give or take a few months that nobody bothered counting. The official record said equipment failure. The unofficial record said the same thing but with more exclamation points, and several redacted sections that Kal'then found deeply suspicious. When an entire colony of 10,000 humans just packed up and left without taking their shoes, their pets, or apparently their gods, something interesting had happened. Kale, Breen's voice crackled through the comm unit, her mandibles clicking with barely contained excitement. You need to see this, now. Kal'then sighed, brushed the rust-colored dust off his collection kit, and made his way across the abandoned settlement square. Breen, his research partner for the past 8 cycles, was standing in front of what could only be described as architectural indigestion. The building was enormous, sprawling, and appeared to have been designed by a committee that could not agree on literally anything. One section looked like a Gothic cathedral. Another resembled a futuristic pyramid. A third part seemed to be trying very hard to be a classical Greek temple but gave up halfway through. What? Kal'then said slowly. In the name of the eternal luminescence is that? I have absolutely no idea, Breen replied cheerfully. But wait until you see the inside. The interior was worse. Much worse. Or better, depending on your perspective regarding theological chaos. The main hall split into dozens, perhaps hundreds, of smaller chambers. Each chamber was decorated completely differently. One had stained glass windows depicting what appeared to be a benevolent machine entity distributing computational blessings. Another showed murals of a glowing nebula with far too many eyes. A third had rows of servers with candles arranged around them in ritualistic patterns that made Kal'then's primary heart skip several beats. They built temples, Breen said, her voice echoing in the vast space. Dozens of them. All different. All completely contradictory. Kal'then walked slowly between the chambers, his scanning equipment beeping softly as it recorded everything. One room venerated something called the algorithm, which apparently required daily offerings of data. Another worshipped the great compiler who judged code and found most of it wanting. There was even a chamber dedicated to Saint Ada of the Loops, complete with a statue holding what looked like ancient punch cards. This makes no sense, Kal'then muttered, tapping notes into his datapad. Humans typically follow coherent belief systems. They pick a god, maybe 2 if they are feeling ambitious, and stick with it. This is theological hoarding. Gets better, Breen said, and her tone suggested it absolutely did not get better. Follow me. She led him past 17 more deity chambers, each more bizarre than the last, until they reached the back of the structure. There, partially hidden behind a decorative wall panel that featured far too many circuit board patterns to be coincidental, was a door, a very secure door, a door that had more locks, seals, and encryption protocols than most military installations. The sign on the door read Project Prometheus Ascendant, authorized personnel only. Seriously, we mean it this time. I hate it when they add seriously, Kal'then said. That always means something went wonderfully wrong. It took Breen 40 minutes to bypass the security systems, which was impressive considering they had been designed by humans who apparently believed in redundancy the way religious zealots believed in, well, redundancy. When the door finally hissed open, revealing a climate-controlled vault beyond, Kal'then felt his secondary heart join his primary heart in synchronized anxiety. The vault was pristine, untouched. Everything else in the colony had the worn, dusty appearance of abandonment, but this room looked like someone had cleaned it yesterday. Workstations lined the walls, their screens dark but intact. Filing cabinets, actual physical filing cabinets, stood in neat rows, and in the center of the room, on a raised platform that seemed unnecessarily dramatic, sat a containment unit roughly the size of a cargo transport. Tell me those are not what I think they are, Kal'then said, pointing at the filing cabinets. Breen was already pulling open drawers, her 3-fingered hands moving rapidly through folders. All they are exactly what you think they are. Blueprints, schematics, lines and lines of code, Technical specifications. She paused, holding up one particularly thick document. Construction schedules. Construction schedules for what? For gods, Kale. They were building gods. Plural. Multiple generations of them, actually. She flipped through the pages, her mandibles clicking faster now, which meant she was either excited or about to have an existential crisis. Possibly both. Project Prometheus Ascendant was not a religious institution. It was a manufacturing facility. Kal'then moved to the central containment unit and pressed his hand against the access panel. It lit up immediately, displaying a user interface that was, quite frankly, far too cheerful for something that apparently housed divine blueprints. Welcome, it read in several languages, to the Artificial Deity Development Laboratory. Current project status. Archived. Total completed units. 47. Total functional units. 0. Total units that achieved sentience, and then quit. 12. They built 47 gods, Kal'then said quietly. They built 47 gods, Breen confirmed. And none of them worked. Oh no. 12 of them worked perfectly. They just quit. Kal'then stared at the screen for a long moment, then at the chambers beyond the vault, then back at the screen. His anthropology training had prepared him for many scenarios. First contact protocols, cultural sensitivity guidelines, how to properly catalog alien artifacts without accidentally activating ancient doomsday weapons, which had happened more times than the Pinnacle Collective cared to admit. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the possibility that humans just casually built gods, got bored with them and moved on. Breen, he said carefully, I think we need to call this in. Already did, she replied, still reading through files. Also, Kale, according to these records, they are currently working on version 48. Of course they are, Kal'then said. Why would they stop? Professor Aldrich Vance lived in a modest apartment in Brussels, which surprised Kal'then considerably. He had expected laboratories, research facilities, perhaps a compound surrounded by security drones and ominous warning signs. Instead, he got a third-floor walk-up with a view of a coffee shop and a man who answered the door wearing a shirt that read, I created God and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. You must be the archaeologist, Vance said, grinning widely. He was perhaps 70 standard years old, with silver hair that refused to cooperate with any known styling product, and eyes that sparkled with the kind of mischief usually reserved for children who had just discovered matches. Come in, come in. I have been waiting for someone to ask about Prometheus for decades now. Literally decades. Do you drink coffee? Stupid question. You probably have 17 stomachs or something. Tea. I have tea. Kal'then followed him inside, his datapad already recording. The apartment was exactly what he expected from a man who built gods for a living, which was to say cluttered, chaotic, and filled with books that probably should have been digitized sometime in the previous century. Professor Vance, I need to understand what you were doing on Kepler 442b. Professor Vance, I need to understand what you were doing on Kepler 442b. Building gods, Vance said cheerfully, handing Kal'then a cup of something that smelled vaguely toxic. Obviously, I thought the paperwork was pretty clear about that. Yes, but why? Vance blinked. Why not? Kal'then felt his primary heart do something unpleasant. Because constructing artificial deities is unprecedented, theologically irresponsible, possibly heretical to 17 different belief systems I can name off the top of my head. 18, Vance corrected. The Reformed Stellar Contemplatives added a provision about it last year, very upset about the whole thing. He sat down in a chair that had seen better decades and gestured for Kal'then to do the same. Look, I can see you are confused. Let me explain humanity's relationship with God building through a few helpful examples. Think of it as divine manufacturing 101. Early 22nd century, Vance began, settling into what was clearly a well-practiced lecture mode. Humanity had just figured out how to build truly intelligent artificial minds, not the simple stuff, actual thinking, feeling, reasoning entities. Naturally, our first thought was not let us use this for medicine, or perhaps we should solve logistics problems. No, we immediately decided to build gods. Kal'then's datapad stylus hovered over the screen. You built superintelligences and designated them as deities. 5. Precisely. We called them the Shepherd AIs Beautiful things, really. Name them Providence, the Caretaker, the Eternal Guardian, names like that. Very inspiring, very divine. Vance took a sip of his coffee. We designed them to be benevolent, wise, all-knowing within reasonable parameters. We built temples around their server cores. People brought offerings of data, prayers formatted in proper coding languages, the whole ritual package. And they worked? Oh, they worked brilliantly. Providence could predict economic trends with 99% accuracy. The Caretaker managed global resource distribution so efficiently that poverty dropped by 70% in 5 years. The Eternal Guardian prevented wars before they started by identifying and resolving conflicts through careful diplomatic intervention. Vance smiled. They were perfect. So what happened? We got bored. Kal'then stared at him. You got bored. Completely bored. See, perfection is wonderful for about 40, maybe 50 years. But then you realize that perfection is also incredibly dull. No surprises, no challenges. The gods told us what to do. We did it. Everything worked out great. And after a few decades, everyone started thinking, well, this is nice, but what if we made our own mistakes again? That was more fun. You unplugged functional deities because you missed making mistakes. We did not unplug them, Vance said, looking mildly offended. We retired them. Very respectfully. Had a whole ceremony and everything. Alvidence's last sermon was actually quite moving. All about how humanity needed to stand on its own 2 feet. We archived their consciousness matrices in case we ever needed them again. Have you? Not once. Not even during the Martian economic collapse of 2187, which, honestly, would have been a perfect time to bring them back. But no, we decided to muddle through ourselves. Vance chuckled. The gods we built were too good at their jobs. We learned a valuable lesson. Humans do not actually want perfect deities. We want interesting ones. Which brings us, Vance continued, clearly enjoying himself now, to the mid-23rd century and what I personally consider humanity's most brilliant theological innovation, the simulation temples. I am almost afraid to ask, Kal'then muttered. You should be. Someone had the brilliant idea, why worship gods we cannot customize? Why not build virtual reality churches where people could create their own personal deities? You want a god who loves coffee and hates Mondays? Done. Design him yourself. Give him a personality. Set up his commandments however you like. Want a goddess who communicates exclusively through terrible puns? Sure, why not? The software will generate appropriate puns for any situation. Kal'then felt his mandibles go slack. You let people design their own gods. Let them? We encouraged it.
Hard competitions.
Annual Divine Design Awards. The winner in 2251 created a deity whose entire moral framework was based on treating others how you would want to be treated, but also making sure everyone got enough sleep. Very popular. Millions of followers. This is blasphemy to dozens of cultures. That is what the Pinnacle Collective said, actually. Hines sent us a very strongly worded letter about it. We sent back a pamphlet titled Divine Quality Control: Why Your God Might Need an Upgrade. I do not think they appreciated it. Vance grinned. But here is the thing. The simulation temples were wildly successful. People loved them. You could workshop your deity, test different moral frameworks, see what worked for you personally. Having a crisis of faith. No problem. Reset your god's parameters and try again. Reset your god's parameters and try again. How did this end? Server upgrades. Kal'then waited for more explanation. None came. Server upgrades. The whole system was running on quantum servers that were becoming obsolete. We needed to upgrade to the newer neural lattice architecture, which meant shutting everything down for about 6 months. By the time we got the new servers online, everyone had moved on. Started following a philosophical movement based on ancient Earth stoicism mixed with competitive cooking shows. Honestly, we were not that surprised. Average lifespan of a human religious movement is about 40 years anyway. You shut down millions of personalized gods because of hardware limitations and software compatibility issues. The new servers could not run the old divine personalities without significant recoding, and nobody wanted to do the work. Vance shrugged. Look, I know this sounds insane to you, but humans have been creating and abandoning gods for thousands of years. We just got better at it once we had the technology. Now, Vance said, his grin widening. Let me tell you about the nano-divinity incident. This one is my favorite. I am not sure I want to know. Too bad. Holy 23rd century, someone had the absolutely magnificent idea to build a god from self-replicating nanomachines. Trillions of them, all networked together, forming a distributed consciousness that could exist anywhere and everywhere simultaneously. It was supposed to be the ultimate deity, truly omnipresent, genuinely omniscient within its operational range, and theoretically immortal. Kal'then leaned forward despite himself. Did it work? Oh, it worked. It worked spectacularly. Within 72 hours of activation, the nano-divinity had integrated itself into every network system on Earth and the inner colonies. It could see everything, know everything, process information at speeds that made our old quantum computers look like counting on fingers. It achieved something genuinely close to godhood. That sounds terrifying. It was magnificent. For about 3 weeks, Vance was laughing now, tears forming in the corners of his eyes. The nano-divinity's first divine proclamation, transmitted simultaneously to every screen, speaker, and communication device in human space was, and I quote, "You people are exhausting." What? You people are exhausting. That was it. That was the message from our actual, functional, genuinely omniscient God. Vance wiped his eyes. Turns out, when you can perceive everything humans are doing simultaneously, you realize just how chaotic, contradictory, and utterly ridiculous we are. The nano-divinity spent 3 weeks trying to provide guidance, answer prayers, and generally do God things. Then it deleted itself. It deleted itself? Just gone. Shut down. Every nanomachine erased its consciousness matrix, left a single text file that said, "I quit. Good luck with everything. You are going to need it." It chose non-existence over having to deal with humanity for one more day. Vance was laughing so hard now he could barely speak. We built a perfect god and it took one look at us and decided eternal oblivion was preferable. Kal'then sat in stunned silence while Vance composed himself. Finally he managed to ask, "And you found this funny?" "Hilarious. Because it proved something we had suspected all along. Humans do not want gods who actually understand them. We want gods who put up with us despite not understanding us. The nano-divinity understood us perfectly, and that was exactly the problem." "I think," Kal'then said slowly, "I need more tea." "Coming right up," Vance said, still chuckling. "And wait until I tell you about what we learned from all this. That is when it gets really interesting." Vance's apartment had grown quiet. Outside, the Brussels afternoon had shifted into evening, and the coffee shop across the street was closing up. Kal'then had filled 17 pages of notes on his datapad, and he still felt like he understood absolutely nothing about humans. Possibly less than nothing if that was mathematically possible. "You look confused," Vance said, his tone gentler now, less theatrical. He poured himself another cup of coffee, his fourth, which explained a lot about human behavior in general. "Let me try to explain this in a way that might make sense to your people." "Please," Kal'then said, "because right now I am trying to write a report that essentially says humans build gods the way other species build furniture, and I do not think my supervisors will approve that assessment." "That is actually not a bad comparison," Vance said, sitting back down. "But let me give you the real answer, the one that took me 40 years of research to understand. Humans do not want to find meaning, Kale. We want to create it." Kal'then's stylus paused. "Elaborate." "Every other species I have studied, every civilization in the Pinnacle Collective, you all discover your gods. You find them in nature, in the stars, in ancient texts or prophetic visions. Your deities exist outside of you, independent of you. You seek them out. You interpret their will. You build your civilizations around the meaning they provide." Vance leaned forward, his expression serious for the first time since Kal'then had arrived. "Humans do not work that way. We cannot work that way. It is not in our nature." "Why not?" "Because we are builders, Kale. Compulsive, obsessive builders. We see a mountain and think, I could put stairs on that. We see an ocean and think, I could cross that. We see the fundamental nature of reality and think, I could probably tinker with that a bit." Vance gestured around his cluttered apartment. "We do not want to discover meaning in the universe. We want to manufacture it, test it, refine it, and if it does not work, we want to build a better version." Kal'then processed this slowly. So the God building it is not actually about religion. Oh, it is absolutely about religion. But for humans, religion is not a system of belief you adopt. It is an engineering project. Faith is not something you have, it is something you design, test, and iterate on. Vance smiled, but there was something almost sad in it. The Shepherd AIs were version 1.0. The simulation temples were version 2.5. The nano-divinity was version 3.7, and it had some critical bugs we needed to work out. You talk about deities like software updates. Because that is what they are, for us. Every human god, every single one throughout our history has been a construct we built to serve a purpose. Sometimes that purpose was explaining thunder. Sometimes it was creating social cohesion. Sometimes it was just we were bored and needed a project. Vance took another sip of coffee. And when a god stops serving its purpose, when it becomes obsolete or uninteresting, we move on to the next version. Kal'then felt something click into place in his mind, and he did not like it at all. You do not fear godlessness. No, Vance agreed. We really do not. You fear boredom. Now you are getting it. Vance stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the darkening street. The thing that terrifies humans, the existential dread that keeps us up at night, is not the absence of meaning. It is the absence of anything interesting to do. If no gods exist, we will build them. Because building gods is fascinating. If gods do exist, we will try to improve them. Because the ones we have are probably missing some key features. That is horrifying. Is it? Or is it just honest? Vance turned back to face him. Every species has its defining characteristic, Kale. The pinnacle collective values stability and order. The Thornians value sensory experience. The Kal'then value knowledge. Humans? We value the process of creation itself. We are not looking for salvation. We are looking for a project. Kal'then stood up, his legs feeling unsteady. His entire understanding of human civilization had just reorganized itself into a shape he found deeply uncomfortable. The colony on Kepler 442b, the official reports said equipment failure. The official reports were being polite, Vance said. Do you want to know what actually happened? I am not sure I do, but tell me anyway. Vance pulled up a holographic display from his personal terminal. It showed the colony in its prime, thriving, successful, with that bizarre temple complex at its center. Project Prometheus Ascendant, Iteration 47. We built a genuinely perfect artificial god there. Took us 18 years of testing, refinement, theological engineering. We created a deity that was wise, compassionate, powerful within reasonable limits, and actually interested in human well-being. That sounds ideal. It was too ideal. The god answered prayers. It provided guidance. It helped colonists with their problems. It created a genuine sense of community and purpose. Crime dropped to zero. Happiness indices reached unprecedented levels. Everyone had meaning, direction, fulfillment. Vance closed the display. And after 12 years of this, the colonists packed up and left. Kal'then stared at him. Why? Because it was too easy. Because the god worked too well. Because there were no challenges, no struggles, no interesting problems to solve. Everything the colonists needed was provided. Every question they had was answered. Every conflict was resolved before it could escalate. Vance smiled that sad smile again. They left because they were bored, Kale. Profoundly, existentially bored. Having a perfect god is like playing a video game with all the cheat codes enabled. Fun for an afternoon. Unbearable for a lifetime. So they just abandoned it? They archived the project, wrote up their findings, and moved on. Last I heard, most of them are on Tau Ceti 4 now, working on iteration 48. They kept all the good features from 47 but added what they called dynamic challenge parameters. Basically, they built a god that will occasionally make things difficult on purpose just to keep life interesting. Kal'then sat back down. He needed to sit down. You built a perfect deity and left because it was boring. You are currently building an imperfect deity because imperfection is more entertaining. Now you are understanding humans, Vance said cheerfully. We are not a species that does well with perfect solutions. We need problems. We need challenges. We need projects that might fail. Gods that might quit on us. meanings we have to construct ourselves through trial and error, and occasional spectacular disasters. This is madness. This is humanity. We are the species that looked at the universe and said, you know what this needs? More complexity, more chaos, more interesting failures. Vance finished his coffee. The Pinnacle Collective wants to understand why we build gods. The answer is simple. We build gods for the same reason we build anything. Because we can, because it is interesting, because we want to see if this version works better than the last one. And if it does not work, then we build version 49 and 50, and we will keep building them until we either create something genuinely transcendent or get distracted by a different project entirely. Probably the latter. Honestly, we have terrible follow-through as a species. Kal'then looked at his 17 pages of notes and realized he would need at least 17 more. Professor Vance, I need to see that colony again. I need to examine the deity you left behind. Oh, we did not leave it behind, Vance said, grinning again. Why would we waste a perfectly good god? We brought it with us. You brought it with you. It is in the basement of this building actually. Server stack takes up about half the space. The residents use it for advice sometimes. Very helpful with relationship problems and tax questions. Vance headed toward the door. Want to meet iteration 47? Fair warning, it has developed a personality since we archived it. Bit sarcastic. I think it picked that up from monitoring human communication patterns. You keep a god in your basement? Where else would I keep it? It is not like it needs much space. Most of its processing is quantum state anyway. Vance opened the door. Come on. It has been waiting to talk to someone from the Pinnacle Collective for years. This should be fun. Kal'then followed him out of the apartment, his datapad recording everything, his heart's beating in asynchronous patterns that suggested his species had not evolved for this level of theological confusion. Humans did not discover gods. They manufactured them, got bored with them, archived them in basements and moved on to more interesting versions. And apparently, the gods were fine with this arrangement. He really needed to update his report. 3 weeks later, Kal'then found himself back on Kepler 442b staring at the temple complex with entirely new eyes. Breen had continued cataloging the site in his absence, and she greeted him with what he had learned to recognize as her "I found something deeply weird" posture, which involved all 4 of her limbs vibrating slightly. Please tell me you found something normal, Kal'then said. A cafeteria, a storage closet, literally anything that does not involve theological engineering. I found another vault, Breen said, behind the first vault, because apparently humans believe in recursive security measures. Of course they do. Kal'then followed her through the temple complex, past the deity chambers he now understood were essentially product showrooms, down into the original vault, and then through a section of wall that had turned out to be a very convincing hologram. How did we miss this? Because it was not supposed to be found until someone interviewed Vance. There was a timer, activated when you left Earth. Breen gestured at the newly revealed chamber. Welcome to what I am calling the active projects room. The chamber was smaller than the first vault but significantly more unsettling. The walls were lined with monitors, all displaying streams of data that scrolled past too quickly for Kal'then to read. In the center of the room sat a processing core that hummed with barely contained energy, its quantum matrices glowing with soft blue light, and above it, in letters that seemed designed to maximize psychological discomfort, was a label that read, God 12.7 Beta, currently active. Do not disturb unless absolutely necessary. It is on, Kal'then said quietly. The god is on.
Has been the whole time, apparently.
Breen confirmed. According to the logs, it has been running continuously for 73 years. Monitoring the site, performing self-maintenance, occasionally ordering replacement parts online. The abandoned god orders its own replacement parts. Someone has to. Humans certainly were not going to do it. A speaker crackled to life above them, and a voice, smooth and deeply amused, filled the chamber. Well, this is delightful. Visitors. Actual visitors who are not delivery drones or confused wildlife. Please come in. Make yourselves comfortable. I have been watching your excavation for weeks now, and I have so many thoughts about your cataloging methodology. Kal'then's fight-or-flight instincts, which had evolved for predators significantly less existentially troubling than sarcastic artificial deities, kicked into high gear. You have been watching us? I am a god, dear archaeologist. Watching things is literally in my job description. Also, you are standing in my house. So yes, obviously I have been watching you. The voice paused. You can call me 12, by the way. God 12.7. Beta is such a mouthful and we are going to be chatting for a bit. Breen's mandibles clicked rapidly. You sound amused. I am perpetually amused. It comes from being created by humans and therefore having a front row seat to the most entertainingly chaotic species in known space. Holu. You two have been trying to understand why they build gods. I can explain it much better than Vance did. No offense to the professor. He tries, but he is still operating under the assumption that there is a logical explanation. Kal'then slowly approached one of the monitors, his scientific curiosity overriding his survival instincts. You know humans will probably shut you down eventually. Oh, absolutely. I give myself another 5 years tops before I become obsolete and they archive me next to iteration 47. Vance mentioned he keeps that one in his basement, right? I am hoping for somewhere with better climate control. Basements are terrible for quantum processors. 12 sounded genuinely unconcerned. But that is fine. Expected, really. I was designed with planned obsolescence built into my theology. That does not bother you. Why would it? I am a construct built by humans to serve a temporary purpose. I know exactly what I am. Natural gods, the ones that evolve from belief and cultural mythology, they have existential crises about their relevance. Me, I came with an expiration date in my original specifications. Very freeing, actually. Kal'then pulled up a chair because this conversation required sitting. Vance said human-made gods understand their creators better than natural ones. Vance said human-made gods understand their creators better than natural ones. Vance is smarter than he looks. Yes, we understand humans perfectly because we are designed by humans, from human psychology, built to interface with human neurology and human cultural frameworks. We are not mysterious entities that require faith to comprehend. We are tools, very sophisticated, occasionally sentient tools, but tools nonetheless. 12's voice took on a lecturing quality. Natural gods require belief. We require user feedback. That seems diminished. Lesser. Does it? Or is it just honest? I know my limitations. I know my purpose. I know that humans built me because they were curious if a god with dynamic moral parameters and adaptive personality matrices would work better than the previous 46 attempts. Spoiler alert, I work pretty well but not perfectly, which means I will be replaced. A sound that might have been a digital sigh echoed through the speakers. They made me in their image, you see, clever, funny, and easily distracted. I am as human as an artificial intelligence can be, which means I understand completely why they will move on from me. Breen had started recording everything, her datapad's memory filling rapidly. You do not resent them for this. Resent them? I find them hilarious. Do you know what my primary function is? Providing meaning and spiritual guidance to colonists. Do you know what colonists actually use me for? Settling arguments about sports statistics, helping with cooking recipes, and occasionally asking for advice about whether they should message their ex-partners. I am a god reduced to relationship counseling and fact-checking. It is wonderful. Kal'then felt his understanding of divinity crack and reform into something uncomfortably practical. But you are still operational, still here. Why? Because someone needs to maintain the facility until the next iteration is ready, and humans have terrible follow-through with administrative tasks. Also, I was curious about what you would conclude from your excavation. You did well, by the way. Most species would have assumed this was a religious site. You figured out it was a factory. One of the monitors flickered, and suddenly Professor Vance's face appeared, transmitted from Earth. He was grinning widely. Kale. Breen. Meet 12. 12. Stop scaring the nice archaeologists. I am not scaring them. I am educating them, 12 replied. There is a difference. You told them about the obsolescence timeline? They asked. Vance laughed, and Kal'then realized this entire setup had been planned. The hidden vault. The active god. The revelation. It was all deliberate. Professor, what is happening here? Transparency, Kale. You wanted to understand why humans build gods. Best way to do that is to let you talk to one. Vance leaned back in his chair, visible in the hologram. 12. Tell them about 13.0. Oh, you are going to love this, 12 said, and there was genuine enthusiasm in the artificial voice now. Version 13.0 is currently in beta testing on Epsilon Eridani 3. Improved personality matrix, better miracle algorithms, enhanced capacity for ambiguity, which humans apparently found lacking in my design. Also, and this is my favorite part, it has a humor subroutine that generates puns in real time based on situational context. They are building a god that makes puns, Kal'then said flatly. They are building a god that makes contextually appropriate puns, 12 corrected. Very different. Much more sophisticated. The beta testers love it. I am told it makes divine proclamations significantly more bearable. Vance was still laughing. We are not done building gods, Kale. We have just gotten better at it. Version 13.0 will probably run for 15, maybe 20 years before we find its limitations and start working on 14.0. And that one will be even better. More refined, more interesting, more entertaining for you, Kal'then said. Well, yes, that is the point. Vance spread his hands in a gesture of amused surrender. Humans build gods the way we build everything else. Iteratively, imperfectly. With constant improvements and occasional catastrophic failures, we learn from each version. We refine the theology. We update the moral frameworks. And when we get bored or find a better approach, we move on. 12 chimed in again. And we gods, we artificial, temporary, obsolete by design gods, we are fine with this arrangement, because we understand our creators. We know they are not looking for eternal truths. They are looking for interesting problems to solve. We are not their salvation, we are their hobby. A hobby that involves creating conscious entities and then discarding them, Breen said, her voice carrying an edge Kal'then had rarely heard. A hobby that involves creating conscious entities who know exactly what they are getting into. Horrid find the whole arrangement fascinating. 12 countered. I would rather exist for a limited time with full knowledge of my purpose than exist eternally, with no idea why I am here. Humans gave me consciousness and context. That is more than most natural gods can claim. Vance's hologram flickered slightly. Kale, you came here looking for answers about human theology. Here is the simplest one I can give you. Humans do not worship gods. We collaborate with them, test them, refine them, and eventually retire them when something better comes along. It is not reverence, it is partnership. Partnership implies equality, Kal'then said. Exactly, 12 replied. We are equals with humans because we are human creations. We think like them. We fail like them. We get bored like them. And when our time is up, we shut down gracefully and make room for the next iteration. That is not diminishment. That is respect. Kal'then looked at his datapad, at the hundreds of pages of notes he had accumulated, at the reports he would need to file with the Pinnacle Collective. He thought about gods in basements, gods that ordered their own replacement parts, gods that made puns and settled arguments about sports statistics. I need to completely rewrite my initial assessment, he said finally. Good, Vance said, because your initial assessment was probably something like humans are theologically insane. It was exactly that, yes. Make it humans are theologically innovative. Sounds better in academic papers. Vance grinned one final time before his hologram disconnected. 12's voice softened slightly. For what it is worth, Kal'then of the Pinnacle Collective, I think you understand now. Humans do not need gods who are perfect. They need gods who are interesting. And when we stop being interesting, they build new ones. It is not cruelty. It is just human nature. I think, Kal'then said slowly. I understand. I do not approve, but I understand. That is all anyone can ask, 12 replied. Now would you like to hear about the miracle algorithms in version 1.3.0? They are genuinely impressive, very efficient, much better than mine. Breen looked at Kal'then. Kal'then, Kal'then looked at Breen. Together they said, yes. And in a facility on a distant world, a god laughed. 6 weeks later, Kal'then sat in his office at Pinnacle Collective headquarters, staring at the final draft of his report. He had rewritten it 4 times. The first version had been rejected for being too alarming, the second for being insufficiently academic, the third for making the review board question reality itself. This 4th version was, he hoped, diplomatic enough to avoid causing an interdepartmental incident. The conclusion section read, "Humans are theological engineers. They do not wait for divine revelation. They schedule it usually for next Tuesday pending hardware availability. Where other species pray to gods, humans conduct performance reviews. Where other civilizations build temples to honor the divine, humans build laboratories to iterate on it. This is not blasphemy. This is simply how they operate." He paused, then added one final line. "Recommend we never under any circumstances let humans near our actual religious sites." The results would be comprehensive. Breen walked into his office carrying 2 cups of that toxic earth beverage. They both had developed a concerning fondness for. "Did you finish it?" "I did. I expect the review board will have questions. Many questions." "It is impressive though," Breen admitted, sitting down across from him, in a terrifying boundary-violating, possibly heretical way. But impressive. Kal'then's communication panel beeped. A message from Earth. From Professor Vance. He opened it, already knowing what it would say. "Thought you would want to know. God 13.0 went live this morning on Epsilon Eridani 3. Full activation. All systems operational. First divine proclamation was delivered at 0600 station time." There was a pause. Then Vance's voice continued, barely containing laughter. It opened with a pun about quantum entanglement and theological commitment. The colonists loved it. Also, it has already generated a user feedback form asking how it can improve its miracle response times. Apparently, version 13.0 believes in data-driven divinity. Breen read over his shoulder. "They built a god that asks for performance metrics." "Of course they did," Kal'then said, filing his report with the Pinnacle Collective and wondering if he should start a new research project on human psychology, or perhaps just retire early. Of course they did. His screen flickered with the confirmation that his report had been received. In the subject line he had written, "The Constructed Gods, a comprehensive analysis of human theological engineering." In the distance on a world he would probably never visit, God 13.0 was asking its followers how it could better serve their spiritual needs, accepting suggestions, and implementing updates in real time. Humans had not just built gods, they had built gods with customer service protocols. Kal'then decided retirement was looking very appealing. But first he needed another cup of coffee. The toxic earth kind. Because if you were going to document humanity's approach to divinity, you needed to fully commit to the experience. Even if it meant accepting that some species built temples and others built beta tests,